All right, welcome. We are back after a long holiday hiatus.
Yes.
We took a much needed break from things. For us, the end of the year and the beginning of the new year is probably, it's me personally, it's my busiest time. You've been baptized into it. You're now at a campus level, so you're experiencing it in a different way. But it's a very, very busy time for us. And we just realized that we're trying to do a few too many things at one time. So we just punted, but we're back now. Very excited. We have some new toys. Mr. Dr. Prophet Talon Duncan has got some new things for us to use, which is fantastic. But we are going to discuss, so I'm going to lay out what we're going to discuss, and then we'll kind of talk through a couple things. We're still going through the tentpoles of how to build a culture, how to build a worship culture. And the one I'm really excited to talk about today is developing your sound as a church or developing your sound as a worship team.
Yeah.
This has taken every second, every minute of the last 22 years of my life to grasp, because I've done it so wrong so many times over and over again, failing to learn from my previous mistakes. So we're going to discuss this. How do you do that? What are some questions you should ask yourself? What are some questions you should ask your team?
Yeah.
What are some ways that you should filter that? Because, it's a very unique thing that we're doing, because you are singing a lot of other people's music, but you're singing other people's music. You have to present that in a certain way and how it makes sense with your congregation and those kinds of things. So before we jump into all of that, I'm going to ask both of you. I've been thinking about mine, and I've actually been listening to mine. I'm very excited about this opening question is, what was the first album or artist, probably artist and the album that went along with it, that like some light switches went on, some light bulbs went on that you were like,
I'll let you go
first.
Why? What's yours? System of a Down? No, I'm kidding.
No, it's not.
He got it.
It is not.
He got
okay,
it. Yeah.
you have to start.
Yeah, he got it.
Are you joking?
No,
Please.
no, I'm not joking.
System of a Down?
Yeah, System of a
Please.
Down was
Okay,
one of
so
the first,
you must explain.
Yes.
Oh.
I can't believe that you
You
got
should
that.
see Talon's face right
I can't
now.
believe that you got
see
that. Yeah. I was just thinking about it as I was using the restroom before this. I was like,
What?
System of a Down. Yeah. So
Put me on the prophetic
toxicity.
team now.
I was like 13 or 14 at the time, and it was like the perfect music for how angsty and rebellious I was feeling at the time. So I heard that, like the distorted guitars, the lyrics, the drums, the bass. I was learning how to play bass. It wasn't too difficult for me to play. I could play along with them. They did like the drop C tuning or whatever. So I'd tune my bass down.
This is
the
amazing.
drop C.
I love it.
But that's what we played, like the garage band I was a part of in 8th grade. We played System of a Down, Chop Suey, Toxicity, Aerials.
Yes.
Aerials,
my gosh.
But I remember sitting down with that tab and
gosh.
like do and like going with that acoustic finger picked part at the beginning of Aerials. So that was really the first album that I like latched on to, and a close second. This will make y'all laugh too. Was Linkin Park's Hybrid Theory.
Oh my God. Who was not listening to that album when it came out?
It was just like, whoa, what is this?
Me.
This is different.
Shelter.
Just
Homeschool kid.
Phil's is gonna be like Carmen's album or something like that. Yeah, so those are
Immediately, it's like, who wasn't listening to that album? Like,
Phil's like, I definitely was not listening to Linkin Park. Did they have a Christian equivalent of Linkin
they
Park?
did. They did. They did.
So System of a
Petra
Down,
for 25
Linkin
years.
Park, those are my first two like introductions into like my own playing an instrument, listening for for the sound that I liked. I had listened to like stuff before that, like Backstreet Boys or stuff like that.
That makes perfect sense.
Will Smith.
To the album you just mentioned.
Bachman, Who Let the Dogs Out.
What?
But those were
What? That's it. You could not have named.
I just went back to Y2K.
Oh my gosh.
Well, that was
You just named-
it. That was it.
Oh,
2001, 2002.
It was a great year.
I was forming my taste as a musician and really coming into my own, like figuring out what I liked, what I didn't like, and yeah.
Now, for reference, how old are you? For
35.
And when did you graduate?
2007.
Okay.
So I graduated 2007, and I started playing bass when I was 7th grade. So
Was
about
it Chop
12 or
Suey?
13.
Because I feel like Chop Suey came out, and every person I knew was like, wake up. Like, everybody was.
You want to?
Yes. It like blew everybody's mind because it made zero sense.
Yeah. It's like,
But he was on the radio constantly.
what was that rhythm? It's such a signature
Yes.
rhythm, you know.
Surge was like,
dude.
he made no sense.
Well, here's
But
the
it was
interesting part.
fascinating.
Here's the interesting part about like going back now, being older, 20 years in the past, and like listening to the lyrics, I was like, man, I didn't realize like how anti-establishment, how anti-government, anti-everything their lyrics were. But
he's Iranian?
It fit my attitude at the time. It fit my rebellious. Like it did something with
up.
me. It connected with the spirit that I was feeling, or the kind of rebelliousness that I was feeling at the age, and so I found a voice through that.
Would you say radiant?
No, he's Iranian, I think.
Yeah, or some
Iranian.
like Serbian or something, like Eastern European.
Surge.
Maybe.
He's Lebanese.
Okay.
Armenian.
Lebanon. Okay.
That's nuts.
So,
dude, he was.
Phil, thank you for prophesying my correct musical influence. You could tell by the way that I play, right? That I let's move it down. No,
I would have thought
the way that you play.
the way that you play.
It's all about you.
No.
The way that you
Drop
play
C,
those passion songs.
Drop C.
Yes. That's amazing. Okay.
Pick bass. So
Phil, what about you?
that's it.
Man, bro, but wait, the way that you play, I would have thought you grew up listening to like the Commodores or something, or like.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
Well, later on, that was a
Phil,
big deal for you because you played in Thelonious Funk.
Yeah. Okay. So let me back up to childhood. But before I even really kind of came
No,
into,
that's what this is for. Absolutely.
So before I even like kind of came into my own, my mom used to listen to jazz fusion growing up. So like Weather Report, Spyro Gyra, kind of like smooth jazz with a lot of like electric bass
That's amazing.
stuff.
Your mom would
slap
listen
bass.
to that?
Yeah. Pink Floyd.
Way to go, Mom.
So diversity of different.
Wow.
U2, Joshua Tree.
Mom.
So anyway, yeah, I had a bunch of different. I didn't really enjoy that until much later on, but it was definitely like in my
It was in your subconscious. In
yeah,
there.
I was playing it in there from an early age, and we listened to it quite a bit. So
I'm going to go to, for me, that. So I didn't start developing like, musically until I was in high school. I was a late bloomer, musically speaking. But Smitty.
yeah,
Man.
I was in kind of our equivalent of a Mardel's, in our little hometown. And I grabbed those headphones, the sampler headphones, and I pressed the button.
You went in the carpeted booth?
Yes, carpeted booth. I pressed the button on Live the Life.
Ugh.
And it came on, and I was like, Mom! I was just like, what is this? And my mom was so happy for me. She's like, oh, that's awesome. Like, you have good taste, son. And I was like 7, 8 years old. But Smitty, I love you. And that album was just like roped me into music, man.
And talk about full circle. You now are friends with him.
Yes.
Which is pretty wild.
Yeah, in my early 20s, I got a phone call. I had met him and met his family and his kids. One of his sons is like my best friend. And got this call from a Nashville number. I was like, hello? It's like, Phil, how you doing? Who is this? This is Michael W. Oh, hello, Michael W.
Do you sit up? Do you sit up like that instantly? You're like,
yeah, posture changes.
Yeah, he's like, let me go change my
Voice
pants
changes.
real quick.
I'm not going to be,
Just a phone call.
when you get that call from like that number, especially back then, they were more rare. You kind of like a little, just like, eh. And that stopped instantly. Yep. And then sang on a couple of projects with him, doing BGV work, traveled with him a little bit. And he's just an amazing, all around, incredible person and wonderful man of God. And that's awesome. Like when, someone impacts you at such an early age and for so long, and then you meet them and you befriend them and you're like, wow, you're the real deal. And that's just like, makes it just so much better.
Which is I will say it's a little like daunting because it's like, you're sometimes, the old saying is like, never meet your heroes because you don't
Right.
want them to be,
Right.
you want them to be exactly how you've created them in your head.
Yeah.
And the Christian music world is not like it's not immune to that. You never know what you're going to get. You can
Yeah.
catch people on a bad day. That doesn't mean that they're a nightmare of a person to be around. But to, for a guy like that to have that big of an impact that early on in your life and then get to meet him and he ends up turning out to be a really great person.
That awesome. Yeah.
That's a big deal. Michael has a very interesting connection to Trinity in multiple ways because Raymond, who was the kind of the head of our department several years ago, traveled with Michael W. for
I met
years.
Raymond when I was on the road with Michael. So our drummer was having, I don't know what was going on, that was on that tour. And they're like, hey, Raymond Boyd's going to sub in. He played on all the worship projects and, he's a great drummer. And we met in the back and he sat next to me. And I remember we were eating food and I was like, Raymond can put it down. And
it's the fastest eater I've ever seen.
He puts me to shame. He puts me to shame.
And he has good taste. I was telling Ronk this the other day. I hardly know Raymond, but I was like, if there's somebody that I had like $1 million to just spend and they're like, spend this on restaurant and experiences, Raymond would be on like the list of people I would want to go do that with.
Oh, he knows them all.
Yeah.
Every time we would bring up a different city, he'd be like, have you eaten here? And I'm like, no, I don't even know what you just said. He knows all of them.
The cheesecake there, fantastic.
Yeah. It's not just
it's like carrot cake or something. I can't remember Raymond. Sorry.
It's not just like all the food's good. It's like, dude, get this one appetizer, but it's only there during these times. And you're like,
gotta have it.
But anyway, so we were sitting there eating, and Raymond's like, yeah, I work at this church in Amarillo, Texas. And he mentioned Jimmy Evans and like the ministry, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I've never been to Amarillo at that point in my life. And so when I ended up here, it was like, I totally connected that dot, which is pretty cool.
It's very, very cool.
God was planting the Amarillo seeds early.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's got weird connections like that.
It does. Yeah. It does.
Yeah. So mine is, I grew up on a lot of CCM music. I grew up in the height of charismatic Christianity in the 90s. So our home for a good portion of time was like absolutely zero secular music. So my mom and dad had the opinion that if we're not going to have that stuff in the house, they would regularly, like anything that we wanted that was Christian music related, they would buy it. Like there was like so many CDs. We would go, we lived in Hereford and we would drive to Amarillo and we'd go to High Plains. This is like a 50-minute drive, almost an hour. Back in the day when it was 60 miles an hour to drive. So ridiculous. 60 miles an hour to drive. It would take a full hour to get from our house all the way to High Plains. And so my mom would just let us load up. We would get all the tapes, and then eventually it was all the CDs. But those early days, my mom was obsessed with the pop, like R&B side of worship. Or of like Christian music.
Like Stacey Orico?
So it was like that stuff. It was like the band. Do you remember the band Anointed?
Yeah.
Like it was a trio?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
They were anointed.
They were anointed. And then there was this one record that BB and CeCe Winans put out.
Yeah, together. Yeah.
And it was, I still can listen to it this day. And I like the production is insane. The musicianship is insane. Their vocals, of course, because it's BB and CeCe, it's like otherworldly. But we would listen to this. This is so funny because I was not of musical, like things weren't connecting yet. But this one album, and I need to look up which album. I'm going to look it up real quick because it's like, die for. Okay, hang on a second. I have to find this. This is live. This is happening right now. Okay, here it is. Okay, this album, it's called Heaven. It is, and this is how burned into my brain this is. These are like core memories of my life. One year, my parents would not let us have any kind of gaming system in the house. Again, this was the height of charismatic mania. So it's like, those are like demon boxes. Like we're not having them in the house. And one year, I guess my parents were like, this is getting a little bit weird. It's really not that big of a deal. And in one Christmas, they bought us a Sega Genesis and a Super Nintendo.
Ooh.
Dang.
I didn't need presents ever again. You could have just stopped giving me presents and just reminded me, hey, you have a Sega and a Super Nintendo, and I'd have been fine. So me and my siblings, my dad bought this really awesome stereo system, and we would put that album on, and we would turn the volume of the game all the way off, and we would blare this album from BB and CC, and it was so impactful. And I didn't know what I was listening to, but it was like it ingrained this deep love of that in me. I mean, playing Street Fighter.
Listen to BB and CC.
With BB and CC singing.
Dude, it's like the weirdest. Only in a
That's so
90s charismatic home were those worlds meeting.
How old were you at this point? Whenever this was, whenever you
I think I
discovered
was sixth grade, so I was probably 11.
When did you start playing an instrument?
That's how I was 16.
Okay, so
Yeah.
this is pre all.
This is pre all
instrument,
that. So my
or-
mom had us in vocal lessons, piano lessons. I hated them. I'm
Me
not going to
too.
pretend like
Yeah.
any of that stuff was like, super foundational.
Well, both your moms sang though in choirs, right?
Uh-huh.
Or sang, yeah.
My mom was diehard choir. She taught a children's choir, it was like an established thing in Hereford that she did it every single year.
That's what my mom did in our little town.
Are you serious? Right now?
Yes.
Did y'all go to like the competitions and stuff?
Not competitions, but we were singing Christmas this, Christmas that.
So we were part of the Nazarene like affiliation of churches. And every year there was a Nazarene vocal competition in Wichita Falls. And our church would put together a kids choir. There would be you could enter in all these different things: solo, duets, trios, small ensemble. I don't know if it was, I think it jumped from 4 to then like 6 was a large ensemble. And then the choirs. And then there were puppet groups,
Oh gosh.
dramas. And the ever elusive that I could never participate in was quizzing. It was like Bible questions.
Wow. Okay.
It was the weirdest thing.
Sword drills.
Sword drills, but it was like factual questions about, how many rocks were in
Kind of obscure.
David's, pouch that he picked up or whatever. It was
5.
like those kinds of things where it was like, and you had these boxes that had A, B, and C, and like you'd have to do it the quickest. You'd have to put your answer out. Anyways, I don't know how I got on this, but like all of those singing competitions were like I was 4 or 5 in the kids choir. Could not participate in anything else because there was no trust allowed to a 4-year-old to be in anything other than we're going to put your brothers and sisters around you and you're going to behave yourself.
There you go.
I think we had the same life together.
Dude,
So you were singing quite a bit, sang quite a bit growing up.
Unfortunately.
You sang quite a bit growing
So
up.
much
Fortunately, but
singing.
now fortunately, yes.
But I will say too, like I don't know if this is the same with you. Like I was in all of that stuff. I could not explain to you technique. It's not like any of that stuff was like, oh yeah, we learned this at a young age. It was just like my mom sang all the time around the house, and she knew what she was doing. But there was never like, sit down, children, I'm going to teach you the art of singing. My vocal teacher wasn't even her, which I think she probably knew. She was like, this isn't gonna, like don't coach your own kids.
Yeah, sure.
They're not gonna want to hear anything from you.
That's where we differ. My mom was my coach. Sing from your gut. Push it out.
Uh-huh. That's why
you're still singing from your gut.
That's why you can sing in the
From your
stratosphere.
gut. Yeah.
So that's mine. The musician side of me got a hold of Dave Matthews, and that was like the big push into.
Was that later on, like high school?
That was
age,
high
or-
school. That was 15, 16 years old. I listened to my first like Dave Matthews album.
Did that make you want to play acoustic or
Yep.
electric? Okay, gotcha.
Well, I was already starting to go that way because it was like I was learning simultaneously Dave Matthews and worship music or Christian music.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the first songs I figured out on the guitar through tab was I Wish We'd All Been Ready by DC Talk, which is just like, there's no situation where anybody wants to hear that song played because it's
even the title. I'm not sure what the song's about. I can guess.
oh my
But
gosh,
like-
it's a song from
like-
like the 70s, from like the Jesus movement. But it's like, I wish we'd all been ready. But
When Jesus comes back? Or,
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Like, it's all about
gotcha.
the
Yeah,
rapture.
interesting.
And it's just like, It's a pretty heavy song. Like you're not like no one's like,
Sunday
hey, will you play
morning.
that in a group setting?
Sunday morning, a nice light.
We're not playing it on Sunday morning.
Well,
Talent
if
show.
you're doing a series on the
Offering
Rapture,
special.
maybe. Just
Maybe.
just-
I'm waiting for that one phone call.
Hey, can y'all do that?
In my sophomore
I wish
year.
we'd all been ready
Yeah.
by DC Talk.
Anyway, so Dave Matthews was the big one for me, and I had like probably one of the most funny, embarrassing moments where like I was so mad at my mom. I think it was my 8th grade. No,
Oh, your birthday.
my birthday.
I
Man.
remember this.
This
Oh,
story
man.
is just it's the worst. It's as a kid, you're like, Mom, why?
It's like that Homer Simpson gif where he's just like going into the bush.
You disappeared in the bush. So all my friends are around, and I asked my mom.
Oh yeah.
I asked my mom for a Dave Matthews album for my birthday.
Oh gosh.
All of my friends have come to Hereford. These are all my Trinity friends. So I'm in high school. All my Trinity friends have come to Hereford for this. I don't know how we convinced them to do that, but they're there. We're all sitting around. I'm opening presents. And my mom, out loud in front of all of these people, was like, hey, sweetie, I could not find Dave Matthews at High Plains Christian Bookstore. And it was like, I got
Ghost White.
It was like ghost white and beet red somehow simultaneous. Like my face split in half, and it was like I was
You look like a candy cane.
nauseous
Oh,
while
God.
also so angry. And I was like, and I shouldn't have said anything. And I was like, well, it's a secular album. And my mom just goes, well, I'm not getting you that. And it was like I wanted to disappear forever. Like at that point, I was like, I'll take a passport and I will move out of the country, and that's where I live now. Wherever I go, first plane out, that's where I live now. I never want to face these people again.
Golly.
But you could have gone to High Plains and gone to the equivalency chart. If you like Dave Matthews, then you might like Mercy
Man.
Me.
I so badly want to know if other people
something.
ever found the equivalency chart at High Plains. They had this chart on the wall that was like, if you like this secular band, and then they would recommend. And the recommendation for if you like Dave Matthews was Mercy Me.
See?
And I remember I was listening to Mercy Me, listening to like I Can Only Imagine. I was like, you're a liar.
That's practically the same as Crush by Dave Matthews. You know?
No diss on Mercy Me. We do love Mercy Me.
But
I love
Yes.
love
not
you,
the
Mercy
same.
Me.
It's not even
But
not close to the same
yeah.
But Mercy Me never in their career was like, we would like
Maybe
to be
Ron
the Christian equivalency.
Cannoli
Dave
and Dave
Matthews.
Matthews.
That's actually
Right?
closer.
Or Woodwinds. You got some Woodwinds in there.
Oh, my
jam,
Lord.
Some
You know-
jamming, you know.
Everyone that is the equivalent of Dave Matthews in Christian music never had a CD in Christian bookstores ever.
It'd be like Kevin Prosh.
You had to.
Yeah.
There are people you know, gold mines you had to dig for.
Mm-hmm.
What were you gonna say?
I was going to ask you, like, what about Michael's music? Whenever you first heard it, really drew you to it. I didn't get a chance to ask you whenever you mentioned. But what about it was? And did you have anything later on before you played an instrument that was like, man, I want to play guitar like that or sing
The first
like that?
thing that hit me when I first heard, that first album from Smitty was this amazing sense of adventure. It was an overwhelming like emotion of adventure, almost how like Steven Spielberg has that effect on a film he makes. You just feel like a kid again, and that you can dream, and this adventure thing comes over you when you watch a Steven Spielberg film. You know, John Williams is in the back doing his thing. It's kind of the way I felt when I first heard Michael's music.
That's a really good way to say it. That makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, and you know, it's funny is like as Michael's gotten older, he's done more and more orchestra stuff, like pieces, you know, instrumental albums, symphony related things. And I still feel that same way when I even hear that. And what's even crazier is as I got to know him personally and his family and their world and the way they do life, that same sense is like there on him, around what they're doing. And even his sons, Ryan is a filmmaker and just is brilliant. Like, so this, and Tyler, we're super close, just brilliant composer, phenomenal talent, and the grandkids. So it's just cool because like that thing that he accurately found a way to take what was a part of his DNA and like his like soul and put it into music. And it's just him being him, which is the neatest part of it all. You know, and he's always found a new ways to do that. And then obviously, you know, he's got the whole worship facet. But yeah, that would be it, the adventure thing.
You say that he found his sound that was...
Yeah, his sound wasn't anything more or less than just who he is expressed
integrity,
audibly.
right? Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
It was
That's a very interesting word that we should discuss, is the idea of integrity in like being true to yourself. You know, sticking to who you are, because it's very hard for musicians, because musicians, it's probably a really good segue for us to jump into this, is that for a lot of musicians and artists, it is a bit of a journey trying to figure out who you are. Like you are kind of regularly. I remember my, you know, probably 18, 19 was like a year like that. Those 2 years were like so much rolling the dice. Like, is this it? Is this it? Is this it?
Yeah.
And you constantly, you know, it sounds goofy, and I don't think other musicians would probably call it this, but you're playing dress up for a period of time. It's like you're like trying stuff on. You're like, am I into reggae? No. Am I into country? No. Am I into, like, you're kind of doing that, and you're exploring all these things, which is also what makes musicians and artists so fascinating, is that there's not as big of an issue with trying things out.
Right.
Like, I'll listen to that at least once. I'll listen to anything once. And then you're like, actually, that's kind of cool. Like, you know, I had my preconceived ideas about what you're showing me, but there's a journey of you finally falling into like, this is me. This feels right. This is what I've settled into. My tastes are kind of developing around this. The musicians that I'm spending time with are kind of all around this. Like,
yeah.
You know, I think the only people that probably don't fall into that are people that are like career-long, like cover band. Is like, we just kind of play whatever, and we just love the act of playing music, and it's super fun, and that's awesome. I love that as well. But that being true to yourself is a real wrestling match for any musician and artist, because you're just like, there's always a bit of you that's like, is it all there yet? Like, you know, like, and I think it's what makes musicians and artists like kind of this never ending, like there's always at least one more page in the book. Because we're always like, I don't know, maybe there's something there. And so you kind of flip it over and you kind of start scribbling. You're like, oh, there's something there. And then sometimes you scribble and you're like, I don't know. I just kind of got weird on that. Then you kind of go backwards and rework it. But I think that openness to exploring those things is always a benefit. But I think establishing the integrity of like, who am I?
Yeah.
And for us as worship musicians, it's probably, that question is probably even more loaded, because we're always putting that through the frame of, or through the lens of, who does God say that I am?
Sure.
Because it's not just, it's not like these two things are separate from each other. Like, oh, there's who I am as an artist, and then there's who I am as the Lord, because this thing can very easily get weird. And the musician, artist, writer, whatever it is, starts to kind of take over. And then it gets really blurry, because you're like, no, I'm doing it in church. I'm doing it for the Lord. And it, you know, before you know it, you look up and you're like, I don't even know what I'm doing. I don't even know if I like this.
Right.
You know? And you can have those moments, which we've been talking about this a lot for the last month, because we're kind of re-exploring some things from our youth as musicians that are things that kind of like, I don't know, there was an integrity component missing. I will say that even for myself, like looking at some music things of like some stuff that I was like, well, I enjoy this, but I feel weird telling people because maybe they'll think something. And now me being like, why do I care?
Yeah.
Why would I care about that? Like, I just like it. It's not like a big deal. Like, anyways, it's a little bit of a rabbit trail, but us approaching this topic from the standpoint of it's very necessary for us as worship leaders. You're constantly, I just think of those like the statues with like the two scales, is you're constantly trying to balance out like what's appropriate for the people that I'm leading. And then also what's appropriate for me? Like who am I in this mixture, and how much of me mixes in with this? Because we all do know that if we're not bought into it, it can feel pretty stagnant very quickly. It can feel like you're going through the motions where you're just like, I don't know, like, am I even in this? Is this even necessary that I'm here? Can just any warm body get up and sing,
Right, but then it's like, well, there's unique things that that God's given me, that are legitimate giftings and talents that He's given me, a voice, a certain style of singing or playing that only you and you have, and I have, right? So, man, there's so much that you said. I need to bookmark that. I think as you kind of hinted at this a second ago, and it's really important distinction between a Christian creative who's creating art or worship for the glory of God, and a secular creative who's creating art and music for their own self-promotion or to promote themselves. And the distinction in my mind is that as a Christian creative, we're trying to discover who God has made us to be. So we're trying to uncover who God says that we are, and what He's called us to do, how He's called us to sing, who He's called us to lead. Whereas the secular creative would say, I'm forging a new identity for myself, right? Instead of uncovering it, I am actually making it. So it's a much different posture of God, reveal who I am, or reveal the sound that you've given me, help me to connect, and even the purpose of art from a secular perspective versus a Christian perspective. Even the purpose of why we do creative things is much different, and it really informs a lot of this conversation and the idea of integrity. A lot of it is, for me, has been uncovering who God has said that I am. Not so much me like forging my identity, but kind of like peeling back all the things that aren't right. Right? It's been very much like a stripping and refining process. Instead of me being formed into who I am creatively, I'm actually being all this extra stuff is being like, no, not that. Hey, you're not this, because you are this thing. And eventually, we will get to the point where, okay, you're ready and you are the sharpened thing, and go and do it. And of course, that's a lifelong process, and there's phases of that, and there's great art that comes out. I'm sure even in Michael's life, even the wild adventure seasons, he's been refined and brought more into, his focus has gotten more and more laser into what God's called him to do. And there's been a process, and that's another thing that's important to remember too, is there's a process to discovering your sound, to discovering what the right sound is for your church or for your people, or for your songs, for your own stuff that you're writing. So there's a big distinction between secular and Christian, and also there's a process, and it takes time.
Now for us within this topic, because you've been doing this a long time, I've been doing this a long time, you have too. What are things that we have to be thinking about that are unique to developing a sound within the four walls of a church that you're either employed by or connected to, versus, because you've got all of these layers, right? Like the most unencumbered is, I just make music for me, and I'm an artist, and I may write a song that's this style, and then I may write one that's this style, and I just kind of do whatever I want to, right? That's the most unencumbered. And then, like a CCM artist, it's a little more dialed down because it has to kind of play within these lanes, right? It can't just be anything. It does need to be something, semi-inspirational, something, towards the heart of God. And then you get into like worship, and you can be a worship artist, and that's a little bit narrower because it's not just any song. It's a semi-singable sort of corporate song. Like I think about the difference between somebody like Michael W. and Chris Tomlin.
Yeah.
Michael W. makes Christian CCM music that can also be worship music. Chris Tomlin is like pretty much like the king of sing-along.
Right.
Right? He's right down there in the middle. And then we go a narrower thing, and it's like, it's for this one church, and we do worship music for this one church in this specific demographic area.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So it's like, you just keep getting narrow and narrower.
Mm-hmm.
And so the church occasionally has the mistake, has done the, what makes sense on the outside, but is actually highly complicated, is you see somebody who is a talented artist, and you're like, that person should be our worship leader. And you take somebody who's unencumbered by those rules and unencumbered by the structure of a church system.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're like, hey, do all of that, but within these constraints.
No.
It's not the same.
I have some thoughts.
I know you've got a ton of thoughts, which I want to set this up so that you can.
I'm ready to swing as
Take
soon as
it,
you say
because
swing, brother.
I have had so many conversations with people who are like, man, this person was so talented. They are so talented, but then we put them in this role and it's been nothing but a headache. And usually my response is like, well, of course it is. You've done a bait and switch. You didn't mean to.
Mm-hmm.
By no means did you mean to do a bait and switch, but that's ultimately what you've done is, hey, we want you to do all the cool stuff that you do. We just wanted you to do it in here. And then once you get in there, it's like, hey, I need you to be at some meetings. I need you to follow up with this person. I need you to do these things. I need you to do these things. And then also like, they need to be songs that are singable. Can you do some songs for the radio? So it's like for most of those artists, I would say a interaction that starts as a hug, by the time you're done, feels like you're getting choked. Anaconda squeeze. So, okay. So after I've said all that, now
Okay.
jump in, because you have probably the most.
My lapel just fell. So I'm going to do.
Phil's wrestling
Go
with this
for it.
lapel mic.
Do
I'm
it.
going to do what I've
Do it.
always wanted to do here.
Dreams do come true.
I am
ladies and
now-
gentlemen.
Just don't peg the meter.
How's my
man.
gain? Is this good? I am now a cool worship leader.
All this work to get hands-free.
Got some Scotch
And it
tape
failed.
on there.
All this
failed.
work to get hands-free, and you still want to hold
Yes, I do.
the tiny microphone. You look like Bob Barker. We need like a long, skinny.
Come on down.
Tiny
So
mic.
with that, we have to look at it different with artists and creatives. And I've actually, the Lord was dropped in my heart about yesterday for a friend to encourage him. Because this person that I was encouraging is one of the most creative people that I know, is so gifted. And in his last season, the Lord took him from being out on the road all the time to now he's in a church. And he's in a very healthy church, a wonderful church that also has like a forte in worship. But God is, just as his friend, like I've just been in this place where I'm able to just kind of encourage him, because that what he's experiencing, I've experienced a few times. And I think, relationships are all strategic, and God has purpose and intentionality behind who he connects us with on a heart level. And God gave me this picture of a branch being grafted into a healthy tree. And I don't know if you guys have seen this, but I literally was watching a video earlier of a single tree that bears 40 different kinds of fruit, from plums to lemons to apples to peaches, whatever. So when you graft a branch onto a tree, it doesn't stop bearing the fruit that it was always meant to bear.
Yeah.
And we have to look at artists and creatives like that in the church. And we have to think of, okay, we brought them in on what we're doing, and we need to know it is not my job to change God's design for the fruit of their gifts, and obviously the fruit of the Spirit and the fruit of God's character and Christ's character and becoming more like Jesus. That is a big time role of the church. But as far as like what God has called them to do, that's between them and Jesus. And the church, a healthy church, will partner with that and nurture it and grow it. And in the end, benefit from it greatly, because all tides, what's the thing? All tides, rising tides are good for all
raise
ships.
all ships.
They raise all the ships. So if, you've grafted in successfully a very creative and artistic person, it is not about like changing their expression or their artistic design. Like the way that I'll go press into it is actually through like art, so like visual art. So I paint, and I got really into painting, oil painting years ago. Actually, a few years ago during COVID.
He's very good at it, by the way.
He is.
Thanks. But even here, in this place, I'm looking around at different paintings, and I know the artist based on the style and the look. And everybody has that. Like every person, and that even personally for me, and I think for all of us listening, is you have to be okay with your sound and with what God has just built you to do.
Yeah.
You can't be like, oh, well, this person sounds, I love this, or I love Chris Stapleton, or I love, whatever. And all of a sudden you just get in this comparison game. You have to be okay with like, God built my voice box like this.
Mm-hmm.
God has wired me to love this kind of sound and this kind of style. And it's like, I've found the deeper I go with God, God actually is unpacking and reminding me more and more of who I am, not less and less of who I am.
Yeah.
God's in this equation to make things simpler for me, not harder. And we were talking about David earlier. So like when David was before King Saul to go out and kill Goliath, Saul like puts all this armor on him. He's like, do it like this, do it like this, do it like this. And David's like, maybe not. And I texted you this, but we slay giants best when we're just walking in our history and the way we know how to roll with God.
Mm-hmm. That's
when we will slay giants best.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same. And the church, we have to do the same with like. And I understand, we're it's not a talent show on Sunday mornings. It's not like we just show up and do whatever you want. There's a goal, there's an agenda, and there are songs that we're doing. And even here at Trinity, we have the tabernacle flow, so we're rolling that way. But what I'm talking about is sound expression, the style of the sound. We just brought on Michael Bethany. We grafted a branch in, and that branch is going to bear awesome fruit, but it's going to be like Michael Bethany fruit.
And it has to be. And you, in the same way, like when you came on in probably a much bigger role than even Michael is. But, we took, I love this man sitting across from me because we have walked through.
Love you too.
We've walked through 2 years of trying to figure out like.
Longer than that now. Yeah.
Yeah. Now at this, I'm, like your time on staff is me trying to figure out, okay, I want to do what's.
How does this fit?
Yeah. How does this fit? I want to use you in the best way possible. I don't want to get in your way. I want to help, but I am structurally, I'm your boss.
Right.
But I know like, so there's this like very, I do think sometimes that people just assume, oh, all you musicians, you guys just get along and you guys are all friends, right? And it's like, no, we're all weird people. Like we're all wrestling with Steve. We're still people.
Yes.
So
grafting in a branch is ugly.
Grafting in a branch, like the whole process of it, it's a lot of like like you don't just like go slap it on and then you're like, all right, you're good, right?
Yeah. Takes time.
It takes time. It takes dedication. It takes tending to it. So I would say this from a practical standpoint is that if you are being approached by a church to be a part of what they're doing, the biggest wrestling match that you will go through, it's part of your journey, it's part of your growth, is who you are is not tied up in the thing that you do. I know that is like, it's at this point in society and in probably all kinds of like self-help stuff, that's a common thing. But for worship, for singers, songwriters, whoever it is, instrumentalists, whatever it is, there is a huge component of I am as good as I am at this thing. So, I'm a guitar player. Well, show me what you got. And if you don't play to a certain proficiency, somebody's like, I don't know. Man, my nephew's better than you are. And immediately there's this like, I can immediately judge whether you're that thing or you're not that thing. So it's very strange for artists. So if you are in this position and you're being asked to step into this role, or you're already in this role and someone's joining your team, the expression of worship on the weekend is not you. Yeah. But you're in it. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
So you're a part of a recipe, right? Or the way that I very much like to look at it, you're a part of a plate presentation.
Yeah, the flavor's going to change a little
bit. It would be so weird to invite you over for dinner and serve you ribeye, chicken breast, pork tenderloin. Like those are all main dishes. Somebody's got to be the side. Somebody's got to play support role.
The Jell-O.
Hey, and you know what? When you put mac and cheese on my plate with my steak, I get even happier.
Yeah.
But I don't want the whole plate to be mac and cheese. I'm not 5.
Right.
I love mac and cheese. So like there's a component of, there's balance in all of this.
Yeah.
So while I am the head of the department, I don't need to be up every weekend. Lord, I don't want to be up every weekend. This man who's sitting across from me can sing lights out of the room. Put him up doing what he does. He should be up. Michael, same thing. When Michael's in town, do whatever. Like, knock yourself out. Be yourself. There's a few parameters I need you to kind of work in because we can't introduce 4 brand new songs every single week. Right. So here's a few parameters, but within those parameters, please be yourself. Run with it, all those kinds of things, because if my identity as the worship pastor gets too wrapped up in it, every new thing that gets tried to get grafted in becomes a threat.
Yeah. And then if I could share from the people coming in, like you're a guy you're considering going to a church, or like my friend I was referencing earlier, you've gone to a larger house covering and you've been grafted into something healthy. It's like you can equally too take on identity and like lose yourself and think, oh, now all of a sudden I need to become absolutely every single thing that is just in this tree. And I lose all of who I am as an individual, what God's put in me to bring to the table as an individual. Another way I like to think of it is like a bouquet of flowers. It's beautiful when every single one is doing its job well and it's put together by the master. They're not all the same. Like the best bouquets are like, there's a variety there, and they're there with intentionality and purpose. And so I was just encouraging my friend. I was like, hey man, I just want you to know that like the Lord just put you on my heart, that the fruit that you've always known that you're going to bear, you're going to keep bearing it. And it's actually just going to get healthier and stronger because you're now a part of the local church. And that's where you belong. And it's up to God if he wants to give any creative that's in the church their own whatever and whenever he wants to. That's up to him. But the beautiful thing is like if you do it that way, you get healthy, you get strong, you get healed, you get whole, you have a home, you have a place that you're connected to for forever. So it's like a beautiful thing, but just don't lose yourself. Yeah. Whichever direction you're coming from. If you're coming from the root up or you're being grafted in, But also you have to, like Till was saying earlier, embrace that ugly process. Like go do a Google search and watch a video of a branch being grafted in. It's like gnarly. And the tree's like, I guess you'd call it tree blood. It's spilling out from both ends and they have to like wrap it and baby it.
Yeah.
You know, it has to have its babying season before it's actually apart. So it's a lot, you know.
And it may take a couple times too. That's the other part that's like, oh, it failed. Well, then we never can do this again. No, that's not how it works. We're going to cut off the messy part and we're going to try it again.
Yeah.
And so this is another thing I wanted to mention because we're working through this with Generations right now. We're doing a big revamp of Generations worship at Hollywood Road. And one of the things that I discovered in kind of this process is that in order to have complete autonomy, meaning I get to make whatever decisions I want to, however I want to, you have the least amount of support. So autonomy very high, support very low. Right. If you want the support, the autonomy goes down. I would like support from the church. The church can provide you support. Yeah. The church can provide you a consistent paycheck. The church can provide you covering. The church can provide somebody pouring into you through mentorship. But the autonomy of doing whatever you want, whenever you want, however you want goes down. So there's a healthy balance somewhere in there. But I think the allure sometimes of musicians who love Jesus is, well, if I could just get on at a church, then I could do all of this stuff and get paid to do it. And the trick is that couldn't be further from the truth, because what you're saying is like, hey, yes, we would love to have you. But when you get the support of the established structure, the autonomy comes down. And for good reason. Musicians don't need to have complete and total autonomy. Artists don't need to have complete and total autonomy.
For sure.
Never.
Sorry, I just hit
You will
mic.
become a drug addict. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that.
No.
But honestly.
But not in the church. Yeah, absolutely.
Not in the church.
Yeah, absolutely
But
not.
I mean, that's for me is like, that's some of my darkest times as a musician or an artist was when I had no covering. I had the most autonomy. I could do whatever I want to, whenever I could stay out as long as I wanted. So I could go talk to anybody I wanted to.
Write whatever music you wanted to.
If I was depressed, I'm gonna write depressed music. If I'm, angry, I'm gonna write angry music. I do whatever I want to. No support, which is why I'm so unhealthy. But hey, for musicians and artists, they value their autonomy. And I've seen more musicians just get so weird in a second because if anything feels like you're trying to control me, I'm out. Mm-hmm. And I do think for all musicians or artists that are connected to a church or connected to the Lord, quite honestly, the Lord's going to press into that. The Lord wants to press into, hey, why do you try to bail and run when somebody's just asking questions or somebody's digging into your life because they love you and care about it? Now, it's not for everybody. Not everybody gets to dig into my life. But if Pastor Jimmy starts asking me questions and I'm like, you're trying to control me, I'm out of here. No, it's a man who just genuinely loves you. And I know people have been through tough stuff, but I mean, it is what it is. We'll do a whole nother episode on church hurt at some point because musicians are probably the most susceptible to it. Artists are the most susceptible to it.
Yes,
we have this very narcissistic tendency to think that people are thinking about us far more than they actually are. They're not. So,
and that they've thought a lot about the questions they're wanting to ask us in advance before asking us.
And in reality, they're just like, I don't know what to talk about with you. I was just going to ask some basic
I just
questions.
wanted to see how you're doing, bro.
Why did you ask me that? Yeah.
Man, I'm having coffee with you, and because I'm having coffee with you, I can't go home to see my kids right now. So this isn't like something I was just looking forward to all day long. Anyways, so there's a very large component that and we're doing a little bit of groundwork before we jump into to more of the nuts and bolts of this, is that if you're at a church and you are an artist, a musician, a songwriter, any of those things where you love to express yourself through the arts, but you're connected to a church, the thing I would constantly be putting in front of you that you've got to always be weighing out, and that's part of it. You don't get one without the other. Even artists in residence, there's not complete 100% total autonomy. Mm-hmm. Because what ends up happening is that if you twist off and write something because you're angry at the Lord and you release it and you're an artist in resident connected to this church, that church is going to be like, whoa. We didn't talk about this. Like, I'm not sure how much we want to be attached to this song. Person like, well, I thought I'm an artist in residence. The support is necessary.
Yeah,
so if you're a musician and you're like, man, I sure would like to not play at bars every single weekend and have beer dumped on my gear and all my stuff smell like smoke, I'd like to play at a church because I've got this relationship with the Lord now. I need to get some better friends. And you come in and someone's like, hey, you need to be careful of the stuff you post on social media. You need to be careful of the people you spend time. Well, it feels like you're trying to control me. No. Being a part of the support system requires you to participate in less autonomy.
Yeah, sure.
You know, like those things go hand in hand. Same way that like any of us in our marriage, I want the stability and I want the forever love that Katie provides me. And with that comes certain stipulations.
Autonomy goes down.
The autonomy goes way down.
Yeah. And it's a good thing.
And it's a very good thing.
It's a blessed thing.
I'm
God's
a way
hands on
better
that.
person because I'm attached to Katie
100%.
than before. But if Katie is asking me, hey, we talked about you doing this, this, and this, and you didn't do that. And I'm like, well, it feels like you're trying to control me. No, I'm just asking you to like
That
follow
relationship
through.
will never
Like
work.
it would never work.
Yeah, it would never work.
It never works.
Yeah.
So if you're a musician or a singer-songwriter, those kinds of things, and you're like the Lord's tugging on your heart to be a part of the local church, I'm just gonna give it to you straight. You're gonna get lots of opportunities to submit, to obey, and to give up some autonomy.
Yeah.
It's just part of it.
For family.
For family,
Yeah.
for support, for connection, for a community.
Yeah.
To not look so dumb.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a little bit of the groundwork. So let's start talking about the nuts and bolts of like, okay, you're a worship leader. You understand here are the requirements. These are things that I've given up some autonomy. I'm part of the house. And somebody said, hey, what is our sound? What goes into this discussion? Does it just flower out of nowhere?
Is it our personal preferences as a worship leader?
Is there our personal preferences? I'm the guy. I'm the worship pastor. So I get to decide.
You hired me to do this, so I'm going to come in and we're going to do the songs off my newest record, which are blues rock at a local country church.
Mm-hmm.
Or
sure. Or I'm super hip, and I've been hired to be at a rural church.
Man.
Well, it's kind of like
so many factors.
We were talking about earlier. It's like the sound overall can't help but be impacted by the individuals that are there.
Yes,
100%, absolutely.
That's a huge thing. Like, and then, and I think of a bouquet. Yeah, there are certain. My sister's a floral designer, which is why she's always putting up cool stuff, and I've seen her do her work, and it's amazing. And it's like she has these like anchor point flowers that go in first. First, there's the grid, so she gets the grid, and then she puts these anchor points, which maybe that's like the journey of worship or the standard, or of this, the standard of that. But then it's like, it's kind of up to you. Well, what do you have to work with?
Sure.
You got some defined colors and the anchors and like shapes that you're kind of wanting to generally stick close to, but there's a lot of freedom within a constraint of.
So let's talk about a real practical one. So you come on staff, or you're already there trying to figure some stuff out. One, it's not the top one, but one that we can discuss is who's on your team, and what can they do realistically. Mm-hmm. So you come in and you're like, hey, I love Israel Houghton. That's the kind of music that I want to do at our church. That's what we're doing. And then you get in there and your musicians, that's tough music to play.
Yeah, for sure.
That's complicated. It's a lot of chord changes. It's a lot of syncopation. There's a lot of hits. There's a lot of parts.
Right.
Also, can you sing like that man? Because I don't know many people who can.
Right.
So those are things that your personal preferences do come to the table, but they do have to be, because you're working with volunteers. This isn't just like, oh, I'm bringing my band, my favorite people to the table, and we're just going to do whatever we want to, and you're going to be happy with it. So let's talk about that component real quick, is who are the people on your team, and how does that factor into what songs we can do, and probably more importantly, what songs we can't do?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you have to even look beyond, like, even the room that you're in. So like the personnel, but we're talking about resources with the church, like the room, how many people are in your congregation on a Sunday, the sound system, the technology, like, are you running tracks? Are you able to, do you have a big enough console to run the full deal? If you want to do an Israel song, can you supplement with tracks? Can you not? So it kind of depends on the technology and resources. But the people, obviously, you have to. You can't outpace your band by picking worship songs that are too technically difficult for the band, or else it's never going to come across the right way. That's a really important thing to consider for sure.
So our musicianship and their capacity factors
vocal
into
capacity, like
what our sound can or can't be.
For sure.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's so funny. I have this weird knack for being around like things in their infancy before they like blow up. Sometimes I'm like, man, God, why didn't you? But and with all of these things, like all they were doing was just working with what they had.
Yep.
They just were being creative with working within the lanes of reality, of musical reality that they could do. And for some churches, that might look like, you know what? We're going to bring back the cajon thing and a little mini kit and a piano and an acoustic guitar, because that's what we've got. And I just think that there's so much freedom that we don't tap into on a global level in the church, because we want to be like that guy.
For sure.
Well, and to your point, you actually
really
make a really good point, is that the idea of scaling back to accommodate what you do have and to like highlight what you do have can be seen through the wrong lens and be like, well, I'm not getting to do all the stuff that I want to. But if you dial it back and it's better.
Yeah. And I have to say, I've been around like sometimes pastors or lead executive guys or whatever that are frustrated because they want more out of, they want like, Hillsong on their platform. And it's just so much pressure.
It is.
And not only is it pressure, but like they're from Australia. And that has a certain style, a certain sound that they carved out over many, many years of doing what they've been doing. And it's funny because the folks that just do what God has asked them to do and they just like work with what they have, oftentimes end up becoming the trendsetters over time.
Yep.
The irony of that.
It's the irony of it, but it's just like, what's amazing about it? It's just being simple, being free, and not complicating things. If you have a huge army that you're working with and everybody's looking for something to do, go for it. If you have like a high concentration of musical talent, like you're in the Nashville area or you're in Reading or whatever, go for it. But most places, that's just not the case, and that's okay.
And, I think there's something that's very, I think there's something that's very spiritual connected to that the Lord is like, no, I would like you to scale this thing back because I want to make it as least about you as possible.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
sure.
I want you to use these people who are here. Yeah, but he's not as good of a guitar. I can call this guy. I want you to use him.
Yeah.
His heart's in the right place.
His heart's in the right place. And I can do more, I can do more with the 300 than you can with the 300,000.
Yeah.
I can do a lot more with that. And to your point, I'm thankful that we do not have to run into this, but I know that this is a common thing for pastors. It's well-meaning on their part, but the comparison to some of these worship houses, it's a real thing, and it's really hard for worship leaders. Thankfully, Pastor Jimmy, I've never had a conversation like that where he's told me, hey, you need to sound more like fill in the blank, or why don't we do more stuff like? We've never had that conversation, and I'm very thankful.
We love
Thank
you, Pastor Jimmy.
We love you, Pastor Jimmy. But if for some reason you are a pastor and you're listening to this, there are better ways to communicate that, because the hardest thing for a church or a worship leader that's got limited options is to then reference something that has unlimited options. Right?
Yeah.
So it's like,
why can't you sound like Lakewood?
Yeah. It's like, I've seen the team at Lakewood, and there's like a whole horn section and a string section. Like, there's stuff there that's like so many people because they can.
Yeah.
And the way that they best utilize their membership is we can actually have a really big team and we can utilize all these amazing, talented people because we have the space to do it.
Right.
But if I am at a church of 300 or 400 people and I've got limited volunteer base and you keep coming to me, hey, why can't, I really want to sound like Elevation. Well, I don't know what to tell you because the reverse would never be okay for a worship leader to approach a pastor and say, hey, you need to speak more like so-and-so. Or can you, hey, why don't you deliver more jokes like so-and-so? So-and-so's super funny. Why don't you deliver more jokes like so-and-so?
Why can't you dress like Chad Beach?
Yeah. All of those things. And I will say, I mean, this is not like a, jab for jab. I'm not saying that, but I am saying that the complication is for a worship team to have the compare. Now, hey, here are great suggestions. Hey, can we do this song by so-and-so? Sure. Here's what I have. Here's the limits. I've had that conversation before. Hey, can we do this song? Yes. Here's the limitations that we have with what we've got going on. I can do an arrangement that works with that, but it won't be exactly that. Oh, that's great. I just wanted us to do the song.
I like the lyrics are,
Great, we can do that. But that kind of, I think those moments of kind of misalignment or misunderstanding can make worship pastors and worship teams extremely frustrated.
Sure, impossible goals to
Impossible
achieve.
goals, like you've set the bar so high. And not that it's like, I want to give up, but I don't like, if at pickup, Thursday pickup, I'm frustrated with my teammate and I'm like, hey, why can't you play, more like Vince Carter? And the guy's like, are you serious? Like,
it's unrealistic.
You've set the bar so high.
But he's older.
He's still play better than all of us.
Man, to Phil's point, like talking about like houses of worship that have done well, it's like if you're constantly pushing your team to be something that they're not, you're actually stifling their creativity. Because a lot of those, like the necessity, those kind of the restraints that were placed on the worship team at those houses actually brought out their sound.
Yeah.
It wasn't like they stepped in and pushed in and embraced those limitations and actually found their sound and actually became creative and highly successful in the songs that they wrote and the things that were
well
done.
And when you're starting off with, hey, can you be like Hillsong? And we love Hillsong. It's just that they have been doing such a good job for so long that's why I'm referencing them and why a pastor might. You're already starting off on the wrong foot, period. The whole direction of that worship ministry is now off center. I think of like when God called people over and over throughout history, it was always, what do you have in your hand?
Yeah.
Even Jesus was like, well, what do you have here? 5 loaves and 2 fishes. Moses, what do you have in your hand? Gideon, it's just over and over. David going to Goliath. It's like when you start off with the question of, well, what do you have in your hand? You are free to head the right direction, which is just following the Lord.
Yeah.
And I will say too, I want to make the distinction as well. This is not just a like pastor to worship leader thing. I've met probably more worship leaders who put a unrealistic pressure on their teams to play or execute like so-and-so because we've got a misalignment of identity in a worship leader or a singer that wants to have, I sang this in my quiet time at home and it was really powerful. I want to recreate that moment in church.
Yeah.
And
that's a whole nother episode.
It's a whole nother episode. And I will tell you what we're hinting at in this, well, not even really hinting at, what we're getting at over and over again is the motive matters, to quote Mr. Leland. Motive matters. So the motive behind wanting your band to sound like so-and-so matters. Wanting your band to execute with excellence. Hey, I want you to sound more like Nigel Hendroff. Okay, do I fit in that anywhere? Or is this just sound identical to him? Just sound identical to him. Well, okay. I don't even need to really be here. You could just put tracks in. The tracks sound just like Nigel.
Right.
Do you want me to even be up here? Like, does any of this stuff need to be plugged in? I can just pantomime up here. And that's what we're getting into, right? It's like,
Yeah.
it's like the Eli, who's on our team, came to us, and Eli has probably one of the more unique, specific kind of guitar styles for a lead guitar player. And I've never heard somebody that I've personally got to play with that weaves his personal inspirations into appropriate ways of executing the parts. His tone is gorgeous. The way he executes the parts, gorgeous. The way that he uses dynamics, it's gorgeous. All of Eli is there while simultaneously recreating what's appropriate for the moment. On the other side, I have met people that are like, I play like me. I'm going to play like me.
Only play like me.
And I only play like me because we've got this weird...
That's just being a bad band
man.
member. That's just being a bad, forget church.
Yeah.
Like, that's just being a bad part of the group.
Yeah, like you're not like, it's like being on the basketball team, like, dude, I shoot. That's what I do. I'm like, you ain't guarding anybody.
Yeah.
You're not passing the ball.
No, I was made to be a shooter.
Hey man, I just shoot threes. Like, can you guard somebody? No, man, I just shoot threes. Like, that's not how that works. That's not fair.
Right.
That's not realistic. So we've got personnel. We've got overall, like, what are we trying to accomplish week in and week out? If we're just trying to sound like so-and-so, that does not help you get closer to developing a sound. Right. Then the big one that I think this is one that I love to talk about because I don't think it gets talked about a lot is demographic. Where are you at in this big, wild, widespread country?
Sure.
That covers everything from urban areas to country to the bayou to the big cities to out in the sticks, to coast, West Coast versus East Coast, Florida Gulf Coast, like all these different places have different kinds of people that gravitate to different kinds of expressions. And we're all borrowing and using the same, 150 songs that are coming from these large worship houses, but how we approach them matters. So let's talk about demographic because we'll discuss our church at here in a second, but let's lob that one out there and discuss that.
That's good. Well, because even within the Trinity Fellowship family, we have, diverse. We have campuses of various sizes, all the way from like a small church in a community of about 2,000, all the way to our main Hollywood Road campus that runs about several thousand on a weekend. So we have all different sizes. So even within our family, we have diverse congregations that we're leading worship for. While doing the same songs, we customize it for each location. Something that I think about are the age of the congregation generally. Like, who are we? There's definitely going to be, ideally in a healthy church, you're going to have people of all ages, but there are, I know at the campus that I'm at the Willow Creek campus, there's a pretty good chunk of like 50 to 60 year olds. So whenever we can do 90s throwback arrangements and bring them back to a time in their walk with the Lord that's really sweet. And even the 30s and 20s know these songs as well. So we can really meet in the middle there. But like stuff like that plays into our sound and kind of what we do in terms of the songs that we pick and the arrangements that we do. The hymns are things that we choose to pull into the worship experience to bring generations together. So demographic, age-wise, geographic, blue collar,
so
white
talk
collar.
about geographic, because even in Amarillo, which is mostly ag-based, most people in any kind of larger city would consider this to be a rural community.
Yeah.
But even within Amarillo, talk about even the difference between the geography of Willow Creek campus versus Hollywood Road.
For sure. I mean, I think that, average church attendee at Willow Creek, there certainly are some folks that have like white collar jobs, like financial planner or insurance sales or stuff like that. But for the most part, it's ag, agricultural farmers, ranchers, country folk, more blue collar. So that affects the songs that we pick and the sound that we go for. And
I even think about your campus pastor.
Sure.
Tyler Levitt
Yeah.
is
Raised on a farm.
When I think of the term salt of the earth,
He loves that. He loves that
I
phrase.
think of the entire
He
Levitt
is the salt of
family.
the earth.
Like
Yeah.
his dad,
Beautiful
his
family.
parents, even Andy's family, like
Mhm.
Balco,
Yeah.
Oklahoma.
Balco, Oklahoma.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
like, you're talking about
Tiny.
like the people that grew up doing stuff with their hands. Like, those are the kinds of people. So Tyler and Andy represent that community incredibly well.
Absolutely.
So how you guys choose to approach songs matters.
It
You're not
does.
going to be having Hillsong Young and Free
No.
or Elevation Rhythm, while those are the up and coming songs and those are like the edgy expressions of worship, those are not appropriate. Those are not appropriate expressions for Willow Creek.
Here's an interesting thought as you were saying that. It was like, the feedback that I get most often, and good feedback, I think, of what, as Tyler and I are talking about, and Pastor Tara, she's a worship pastor out there as well, talking about worship department and the worship sound is, instead of like the sound or what we're doing like sonically, it's the connection of the worship team with the congregation.
There it is.
That's what he's most concerned about, and me too. That's really in a smaller church environment. There's something that changes whenever you start to know the people that you're leading in worship. Outside of the sound, the sound is certainly, obviously, like as you get to know your church and the people that are coming to your church, you're going to change some things. And as Pastor Tara and I have gotten more involved in the church and are more ingrained in knowing who's there, who we're pastoring, it changes the songs that we pick and things like that. But that's really a overrated and underutilized point of worship teams at smaller churches is be involved in the church and know the people that you're leading in worship.
It doesn't mean go get
things.
A fiddle and go get an upright bass. And like, that's not, because
to try and connect with them.
It's not like you guys are doing like folk renditions of these songs. No. I mean,
so we're doing roughly, very similar
we're doing a lot of the
songs
same stuff
to Hollywood Road.
But the relational connection, which I think is so, I love that you're touching on this, because we're transcending the actual topic of developing a sound.
So that's why I kind of was like,
but I love it. Like the people in your congregation will eat whatever meal you put in front of them as long as the relational component is there.
100%.
You know what I'm saying? Like we're not talking about people who are like, oh, I only listen to, classic rock. So if you don't do all these songs and they sound like Bob Seger, I'm not listening. They're going to sing whatever songs you're singing, but the relational component is what's so important at a campus like that, is that developing a sound becomes much easier.
For sure.
When the relational component is there, which I envy a lot at your campus, because we can look out in the congregation in any direction and I can see 50 to 75 people that I've never seen before.
Sure.
I've never met before. I've been at the church for 20 plus years. That's how new the church grows constantly. I mean, our entire 1115 demographic has changed dramatically in the last 10 years. Mm-hmm. So there's but that I think is such an awesome part for us to touch on, is that what we're talking about in this is not like, oh, do we use a fiddle? Oh, do we have lap steel? Do we have a DJ? It's like, no, we're not talking about that. It's talking about developing, using songs and executing worship in combination with the relational components that you've put into your church, because it doesn't matter how good you are if none of that congregation knows who you are and you won't come out and talk to them, and you only come out on stage to sing and then you disappear.
Yes.
It's not going to matter if you can sing the doors off. It's not going to matter if it sounds exactly like everything that they listen to on a weekend. They won't care.
Yeah.
But the converse works as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If I've got a connection with you relationally, dude, whatever you do, I'm here for it.
Absolutely.
I love it. So anyways, I love that. Makes me so happy that you made that connection, because it's so if you are wanting to experiment
Yeah.
with your sound and develop some things and do some things, develop the relationship first with your congregation.
100%.
Develop.
And, that's exactly what's happened. I'm glad that you mentioned that, because that's exactly, from very, as time's gone on and we've gotten more comfortable with people, there's that level of trust. The relationship has grown tighter between the worship team and the congregation. Now we can really we can go for 30 minutes on a Sunday morning and throw in some new songs, and they'll join in and sing them in a way that they didn't 2 years ago.
Yep.
So as time's gone on, and of course I anticipate that'll continue to grow as time goes on too, but it really helps us to be able to experiment and to really hone in to what our sound is, to what the people are feeling. So I think even like Pastor Tara, she, as time's gone on, and she's gotten together with different groups in the church and gotten together with some of the Abrahams of the older generation of our church. She realized how much they appreciate hymns. So as time's gone on, we've incorporated more of those in worship, and it's really served as a bridge for our congregation and really helped lift them up in worship. And it's helped us discover, well, maybe that's part of our sound, is not discovered just by experimenting on the sound, but listening to the people's stories and
Sure.
Tell me about your first worship, just kind of just casual relationship building, being around one another. So that's really helped us hone in on our sound too, just spending time with the church.
Man, that's awesome. I love that so much. So as we're working through this, I think we got maybe one or two other kind of things that we'll touch on, but that one, I think in my head, when I'm thinking about a checklist of developing a sound, I think that has to move to the absolute top of it.
Yeah, for sure.
If you've not invested relationally and you have no relational equity with the people in your congregation, it doesn't matter what you do, you're going to be fighting an uphill battle.
Absolutely.
But the thing that's so amazing, the more relational equity you have, the wider takeoff you have.
Sure.
The wider lane you get to work
We
in.
could do Hillsong Young and Free, and they would go with us.
They'd be like, man, that's kind of cool. What is that?
What's that new song you did?
You know
Was
what I'm
that
saying?
Relentless? Yeah.
So I think that the misunderstanding is oh, well, we've got to be really, really good in order for our church to like it. No, it's actually quite the opposite. The more relationship you develop with your congregation, with the people that are the week in and week out warriors who are there, this sounds strange, and I'm not saying it this way, the bar for them appreciating it actually gets easier and easier. You want the bar at the highest where you actually have to jump through hoops, have no relational equity with the people in your congregation.
Yeah.
Then you have to be so freakishly good every single week, no mistakes. That's how good you have to be if you don't participate in the relational equity. And even then, it's just they're awesome. I don't know who that guy is. I've never seen him outside of the stage. That's the only time I ever see him.
Right.
Comes
out and leads worship. Yeah.
So that one, to me, the relational component of if you are having the conversation of what is our sound, before you start getting into the nuts and bolts of, do we do Hillsong songs? Can we do this? What kind of musicians do we have? First, have the conversation. How much am I connected to my congregation? How much is my team connected to the congregation? Because if we just come up, play, and then we vaporize into the green room and we stay back there until it's time to come back out again.
Yeah.
You've got to be in and amongst the people.
That's a great pastoral point. Right?
You have to.
Yeah, get your team out there. You guys need to get out and be involved in the community.
Yeah.
Because worship teams are notorious for that, not being involved in worship or in the church community as a whole and just kind of existing on an island. So trying to reverse that for sure and make that a priority.
Gosh, I can't help but think of 150 years ago, or even 100 years ago, gosh, maybe even 75, 60 years ago, before Christian music existed, or was its own genre or subgenre. But it's all it was a lot of that. It was just the church being the church. And then music, whether you were in the hills of West Virginia where there were bluegrass instruments, or you were down in the deep South where there was, or up in Chicago with the B3, or you were, wherever you were, the music was just an overflow of everyone getting together. And it's just very natural, very unhindered. Not looking at charts or CCLI, and those are great things, but it gave way to all of these. It eventually birthed all of these sounds across America, and many of them actually ended up influencing pop music. That's would become all of our, whether it's Beyonce, Michael Jackson, or whatever. That's a whole nother conversation. But I love that. Maybe we just need to get back to relationships and us being us, together as a family. And then boop, there it is, unfiltered, unhindered. And just most of all, everyone knows everybody and everyone loves each other. That kind of familial thing. That's a big deal.
It is.
Yeah.
It's a really, really big deal. And you know what else too? I'll say this about how I mentioned earlier, I have this weird knack of being around things, music things, worship things before they explode, or an individual before they explode. All the time with those movements or those people, there's like a strong family unit that's built around what they're doing. Like, I mean, tight, really, really tight. Everybody's got everybody's back. Everyone knows everyone well, looking out for each other, family stuff happening. And they're also not worried about like, well, we need to be like Hillsong. And when you put those two things together, it's like, look out.
Yeah.
Something's going to happen.
For sure.
Well, I think too, like, if those ideas start to, and they're normal. I'm not having those conversations like, man, I wish we sounded like so-and-so, or man, I wish, like, those are all normal thoughts. I'm not saying that they're not normal, but always filter them through kind of, this is more kind of a comical thing, but always filter them through how weird would it be to say to your mom, hey, I wish you were more like Jake's mom. Like, why can't you cook like Jake's mom? Dad, why can't you make as much money as Jamie's dad does?
Oh.
Those would be crushing things to say to one to another. And the reality of it is, I am not Jude's favorite person because of how much money I make. Jude has no clue how much money I make. Jude is obsessed with me and loves me because I'm his dad. That'll never change. That does not have any bearing on how much money I make, how cool I dress, how good I am at my instrument, or how great I am at writing songs.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm his dad because of a deep, deep familial thing that, quite honestly, he can't change.
Right.
You can go wherever you want to, son. You're always my kid, no matter what. So in these conversations, if you are the worship pastor, you're the musician, I think one other thing that we probably need to mention just a reminder, because I went through a season of this where I was really wrestling as a musician. I did not have a very healthy outlook of myself. And in those seasons, I was not gracious to those around me, including the worship leaders that I was serving. And so the things that just seemed like they made so much sense in my head, why don't you just do these songs? Like, these are such, like, man, he's so this or that, they don't understand these things, or they're so corny, or they're so hokey. Be incredibly gracious to those people. I'm now sitting in both chairs. And it's incredibly important, because as you get older, you start to realize what is important in these seasons of life. Yes, I want to do awesome songs. I want to do new songs when we can. I want to have throwbacks. I want to have a well-balanced plate of food. That's what I want. It can't be all bangers. It can't be all brand new songs.
Right.
And it can't be all old songs.
Right. Right.
Same way is that it can't just be all Southern side dishes. I can't just have like, there's
Gravy.
no meat. Yeah, the whole plate can't be gravy.
Well, you can.
Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Right. Right. You'll feel the effects.
Yeah, you'll feel the effects later. But those are things, if you're a musician and you're listening to this, if you're a young worship leader and you're listening to this, and you're wondering, why don't they just do this thing? You'll know one day. But I would urge you to walk in grace with those people. I would urge you to, worship leaders, walk in grace with your senior pastor. They see things from a perspective that you never could.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like you need them just as much as they need you. And so all these components, initially we kind of hinted that we were going to get into some like real particulars about developing your sound. But a huge component of this is relational equity, how you care for and utilize the people that are entrusted to you.
Mm-hmm.
So if you keep giving a group of musicians songs you wish they could play, they will continue to feel like they're not good enough. We talk about this all the time for new worship leaders. We set them up with softballs constantly.
Yeah.
You have to have something to build off of. If I give a brand new worship leader any Charity Gale song, it's not a softball. That is a 180 mile an hour ping pong ball. That's hard to hit. That's hard to get right.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to nail.
But
for somebody that's new, if I give them a song that our congregation knows, our congregation loves, and I'm standing up there with you, so you're co-signed by somebody the congregation knows, home run.
Yes.
That person leaves stage and like, man,
okay,
we
did it.
Same thing with musicians. If I give them Israel, if I give them, some pretty complex music, and they keep playing that week in and week out, and they're like, man, this is like, I am not getting it. They're going to walk away and be like, I don't even know if I want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even know if I really enjoy this. But maybe I give them, hey, we're going to play Better Word. Great song. It's a great song for you to execute. Great song for you to build some reps on. And you walk away from that weekend, dude, you crushed it. You killed it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about being super complex. We'll get to that. We'll get to some fun things. But building your sound is utilizing your people, taking care of your people, pastoring your people, being connected to your congregation.
Yeah.
The actual nuts and bolts of your sound.
That will take care of itself.
That'll take care of itself.
Seek first these things, and then the rest.
Now I know why Chill had me lead Better Word over and over when I first got
here. The mystery has been revealed. Yeah, me too.
It's singing every line. Hey, if you do it in Leland's, if you do it in Leland's key and you hit that big note, that is not a softball. Yeah, that's no softball.
He's got it. He's got it for sure. Yeah. I mean, really, like there's not like these are some practical things that you can do. Like you can spend more time with your congregation, pastor your team, spend more time with them, set them up for success. But in terms of like actually discovering your sound, you really are looking around. What has God put in your hand? Back to what has God placed? Where has He placed you? Who has He placed you around? And get to work. I mean, like don't look over in New York City or Australia or bigger metro areas if you're not there and try to emulate that. But okay.
Hey, for reference, I will say this because I've had this conversation a lot. Our last little EP that we did, the 5 songs, none of those songs on there are like profoundly unique from worship music. It all falls mostly down the center. The reason why it is its own unique thing to our congregation is because they know who's singing. I know you. I know Phil. I know Macy.
Mm-hmm. I've heard them sing before.
That's the thing that's so ironic about it. It's not that the songs are like so groundbreaking and edgy. To our congregation, what makes it unique is I know you. Your kids go to school with my kids, and I see you at pickup. And I love this song because I love you. I know I love this song because I love Phil and I know him. And we've gotten to know each other. Macy's daughter and my daughter are in daycare together. Oops, sorry. That's what makes it your sound, is because it's you.
Right. Right.
And that's, I think, something that's completely underrated in the conversation. Is it doesn't mean that you've got to, like so many people take that snapshot of Hillsong United in the early 2000s when it sounded like basically pop punk. And everybody's like, oh my gosh, that was so groundbreaking. The ironic part is all of those guys were just playing music that they liked playing. They were all listening to pop punk, and it just happened. But you know what's funny? So many of those records were made by the same 6 guys. So it's not like there was just this like sea of musicians. It was the same guys over and over again because that was kind of the youth group thing.
Yeah.
The youth group was not monstrous at the time. So it's not, they didn't have this big giant well-oiled machine like they do now. That was their thing. That's what made sense to them at the time.
That's what they had in their hand. They're like, well, you guys like pop punk? Me too. Sweet.
Yeah.
Let's write some songs.
Well, I think
What's
about that first Bethel record that I heard, and it was just Brian by himself on acoustic. When my heart is overwhelmed.
Oh, man.
And I cannot hear you.
Yeah.
1 million people have done acoustic versions in a studio before Brian. Brian wasn't in there like playing the guitar backwards and like he restrung it with a bunch of he wasn't doing anything that was groundbreaking, but there was something different. Brian was just doing what he had in his hands.
Dude, he's been one that's just stayed the course too. It's been cool to watch it. Like
Brian Johnson.
Brian Johnson, like his songs and his style is just kind of, he's like whatever.
He's himself. It seems like he's like, I like to hunt. I want to shoot guns.
Yeah.
And I'm not
even when he leads worship, there's all
sound
these,
like an Amarillo guy.
Even like his, exactly. Like his posture in worship, you have like people dancing and flags waving and stuff. Right. He's just up there. Let's sing out a new song to the Lord.
Yeah. Oh,
Church.
Man.
We love
That's a very important common theme in all of this as we wrap this thing up. That's probably the most important common thing. The Lord has put something in your hand today.
Mm-hmm.
It may be different tomorrow. It might be different a year from now. But as my dad always said, do the next right thing. Mm-hmm. So the next right thing is what you have going on today. You don't have all the musicians you wish you had today. You have who God's entrusted you to. And if you don't have many, take care of the ones that you have.
Yeah.
You got a great guitar player, nurture that relationship. Spend time with them, pastor them, love on them, make sure that they know you have their back. Because then God will see that and he'll hand you another, okay, here's a drummer. Here's an electric guitar player. Mm-hmm. And God will keep adding those people. And you'll look up 10 years from then, and all those people will become better musicians, more accomplished musicians. And it's not because of you, but it's because you were faithful with the thing that was in your hand. Mm-hmm. You're not going to get some onslaught of talent busting down your doors if you're blowing off the people that are in front of you right now.
Sure.
It just doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
God
won't bless it.
God won't bless it, man. It's just how it functions, how it works.
Amen.
All right. Well, that concludes this episode. I'm really glad to be back.
Yeah.
This is really nice.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun to get back in here.
Yeah, it's fun to get back in here. And Talon, great job.
Thanks, Talon. Talon is awesome. When you give Talon a shout out.
You guys don't get to see Talon. Talon will come on here. We're going to have him a featured guest.
Yeah, we got a seat for you right here, buddy.
It's like the camera guy, for Bob Ross. I was like, who was that? He'd always talk to him.
Mm-hmm.
He'd be like, Talon.
Dude, this is so funny that you brought him up. I came into our room last night. Yeah, keep it rolling. This is important.
Bob Ross.
No, it's so funny. I came into our room last night and I could feel it was so relaxed. I walked into our bedroom and Katie's just watching Bob Ross.
Yes.
And the funniest part is she looked at me and she nodded her head like this. And our son Jude was sleeping, he had fallen asleep watching Bob Ross. And I was like, well, no wonder. The lights were still on. Katie, is watching social media at an unnecessarily loud level for whatever reason. And Jude's out because Bob Ross brings peace.
Happy trees.
To the city. Happy trees, man. So, hey, Bob Ross just painted what's in his hand.
Yeah, he did. He did.
There's a sermon in there.
One canvas at a time. One happy tree at a time.
One happy tree at a time. All right. Anyways, to wrap things up, we love you. Thank you for watching this. Mm-hmm. Thank you for being a part of this. If you want to know more about Trinity Fellowship, you can visit tfc.org. You can go check out a campus near you, or you can join our amazing online campus. My name is Teal. I'm the worship pastor at Trinity Fellowship, Hollywood Road. This is Stephen Ronk. He's all things at Willow Creek.
Pastor of spiritual
Pastor of all those things.
engagement. Yeah, spiritual stuff. Yeah.
Philip is with me at the Hollywood Road campus. He's associate worship pastor, right-hand man. He is my right arm.
He's my right arm.
He's my guy. He's got the Bob Barker mic.
Come on down.
Yeah. So, and Talon is behind the scenes.
Woo, go
Go
Talon.
Talon.
But we really appreciate
Yes,
you
Talon.
joining us.
Talon.
Like I said, you can find out more information about who we are, more information about who Trinity Fellowship is at all of the various social media things that are tied to these posts. And
Click the links below.
Some
Yeah.
description somewhere has to be somewhere. Right, Talon? Okay. Excellent. All right. We'll see you later.
Yeah.